Hello Year 8 and welcome to your second lesson on Britain 1750 to 1900, particularly looking at the agricultural revolution. So can you now write down the title and the aim, which is Big Fat Pigs and Fallow Fields, and once you've done that, can you have a look at your knowledge organiser for this topic, particularly numbers 1 to 5. Pause this video briefly while you do that. So now on the screen you should be able to see the 5 key terms that are going to be particularly important in this early stage: revolution, industrial, urbanisation, transport, and particularly agriculture. So these are some of the key terms that you definitely need to know for the remainder of this topic. So once again, just make sure you're familiar with these terms and then we'll move on. So our first task is again to look at the big picture overview. So on the screen in front of you, you should see a graph. This shows the population in millions of Britain between 1701 and the mid 1800s. And there are 2 questions you need to ask. The first is, how did the population change throughout this period? That's a straightforward comprehension question, but do try and give specific details. The second one is more speculative. What problems would this cause? So can you now spend 2-3 minutes writing nice full sentence answers to these 2 questions? Again, pause the video while you complete this task. So hopefully one problem you've suggested would be that with such a massive population increase, farming and food supplies just could not keep up if they stayed in the 1701 mode of doing things. And if you look on the screen, this is the situation in 1701. In the 1700s, most farming was done in strips. So if you look at the map on the screen, you can see that the fields are divided into long, thin strips. Farmers would be given these small strips of land and they'd share some common grazing land. This method didn't really produce enough food for this growing population. There was enough food for the farmers to provide for themselves and to provide for some of the population, but certainly when the population doubles and triples, this was not enough. This could not cope. So it was definitely time for a revolution in farming. So now we get onto your first main task. So there are 4 main changes to farming during this period. And these are outlined on your data capture sheet that you now need to open. It's imaginatively titled Data Capture. If you look on this sheet, there are 4 columns, and each column has a number of short questions that need answering. You can either answer them on this sheet or on a separate document or in your book. But what's important is you answer these questions giving a few brief specific details. There's no need for long written answers. Short, sharp, specific answers. So once you've opened this, you will also need the imaginatively titled document called Info Sheets. This will have the information on for the 4 key areas. So using that information and this sheet, you now need to fill in as many of these short answers as humanly possible, and also at the bottom you will notice there's kind of a summary box. This is what you need to fill in as well. So pause this video, this should take about 10 to 15 minutes, answer all of the questions on the sheet with specific detail, and then unpause the video once you've completed this. So now that you've completed that chart, you should have 4 nice summaries for how each area changed throughout this agricultural revolution period. These should be nice broad overviews that give the big picture. This information will be very, very important for the next task. So just check you've completed the summary boxes and you can say in 1 or 2 sentences how each area changed. So the next task you're going to be asked to do, and this is the key piece of work that we need you to upload back onto the Google Classroom, is writing an unfolding historical narrative. Now, don't worry if you've never heard those words in that order before. Ultimately, this is a very, very important skill, and it's basically being able to write an analytical historical narrative. Effectively the story of change, but explaining how a sequence of events led to an overall change, how one thing led to another thing, which led to another thing, and what was the end result. Now, when you come to planning or writing or thinking about one of these historical narratives, the easiest way to think of it is effectively like a game of leapfrog. Your development is leaping from one event to another event to another event. And if you look on the second page of the data capture sheet, you'll find a structure there to help you. This has the order of events that you should be writing about put in order for you. So that's some of the work done already. As it says on the slide, the important thing to do here is explain how one feature led to another feature, which led to, in this case, a significant change in farming. And what you need to do is, this is the key piece of work you will need to upload, so whether you do it as a Word document, whether you write it in your book, or however you choose to write it, you will need to upload this. So we are looking for a full, detailed account with evidence and explanation. But don't worry, we'll talk through the structure on the next slide. So in front of you, you have the broad plan of what we want you to write. It looks a lot, but it's really not. Effectively, you are filling in the gaps. You have this on your data capture sheet. If needs be, pause this video on this screen and use it as your writing plan. But you should be able to see the logical process it takes. And it starts with an opening sentence of, the first major development was enclosure. That's the sentence given to you. Then all you need to do is add in, this changed farming by, and explain what enclosure was. Then you've got the next sentence, enclosure then led to crop rotation because. So you need to explain the link between enclosure and crop rotation. And ultimately it's this idea that with strip farming you couldn't do crop rotation because the fields were too small. With bigger fields, through enclosure, this led to crop rotation. It was much easier. Then you need to add on and say crop rotation meant, and you need to say why crop rotation was good and what it did. So you talk about the movement from fallow fields to including things like clover. Use those specific details. You then need to add on the next sentence, crop rotation helped encourage new farming technology because, again, explain how this new method of farming then led to more technology being developed. Then your second sentence is technology improved farming by, that's pretty obvious, mechanisation, things were done faster. And then you move on to selective breeding, do the same process, how this improved, this then led to, and then finally you need a brief summary or conclusion that starts with all of which worked together to create an agricultural revolution which meant that, and ultimately here we're looking at a rapid increase in the amount of food and how quickly it could be grown and used to feed this massively increasing population. So pause the video, use this screen as a writing guide, make sure when you are doing this you are aware that this is the piece of work you are uploading to Google Classroom in whichever way, shape or form you want to do. And finally, we've just got 4 or 5 quick questions to try and draw everything together. So the first question you need to ask, and please write these down, is was there an agricultural revolution? Did the change happen so significantly that it counted as a revolution, and why? Easy one next, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being lots of change, how much change do you think there actually was? Are there some things that didn't change? And then 2 questions then, who benefited the most from this process and who suffered the most as a result of this change? And if you want, there's a nice little picture of a 19th century farmer looking quite deep in thought. Can you give him a name and suggest what you think could have been the biggest change for this guy? Thank you very much. I hope this has been useful. Do remember to upload your work to Google Classroom, either as a picture of what you've written or as an electronic file. Until next week, thank you very much.